why does Israel need our help? We need to get out of their way. I mean, we interfere with them. We interfere with them when they deal with their borders, when they want to have peace treaties. We tell them what they can do because we buy their allegiance and they sacrifice their sovereignty to us. And then they decide they want to bomb something. That's their business, but they should, suffer the consequences. When they bombed the Iraqi missile site, nuclear site back in the 80s, I was one of the few in Congress that said it's none of our business, and Israel should take care of themselves. Israel has 200, 300 nuclear missiles, and they can take care of themselves. Why should we commit? We don't even have a treaty with Israel. Why do we have this automatic commitment that we're going to send our kids and send our money endlessly to Israel? So I think they're quite capable of taking care of themselves. I think we do detriment. Just think of all the money we gave to Egypt over 30 or 40 years. Now look, we were buying friendship. Now there's a civil war. They're less friendly to Israel. That whole thing is going to backfire once we go bankrupt and we remove our troops. So I think we should be very cautious in our willingness to go to war and send troops without a proper declaration by the U.S. Congress.
What's going on, everyone? Saucer Kenny here today, and today is the Inconvenient Truth series. Today on Inconvenient Truths, we're going to be talking about American interventionism and why it's necessarily a bad thing for a pro-American agenda. Now, I mentioned this. I'm using the Hamas war and Israel as the example of American interventionism and how it does a lot of harm, not only to our own interest, but also to the people we claim to want to help with, right? So in the beginning of the video, I showed you a video from Ron Paul, OG of the anti-war Republican movement. And now we got new people who are anti-war like Trump and Vivek. Those two candidates are considered as anti-war. They're the closest thing to a Ron Paul that I have seen in years, other than his son Rand Paul, obviously. And I wanted to let you know that was 11 years ago. That video, that snippet, that intro you just saw was 11 years ago. And look at it today. Look what happened. We funded both sides of the war, technically, right? Hamas, who's backed by Iran. They got $6 billion. They rebalanced their budget because they saw $6 billion coming in for medical or whatever. So now they had free resources to fund this attack. There's reports that Afghanistan, weapons that we left at Afghanistan because of the failed pullout by Biden, those same weaponry has been found. There's evidence of it being found amongst Hamas that were used to attack and kill people in Israel. A lot of the stuff that we fall into, and he made the example with Egypt, it's crazy how we always find ourselves funding both sides of the war. My point is, I don't want America governing what a sovereign country shouldn't and shouldn't allow to do. Israel, hey, handle your business. Whatever you think. But for us to be like, oh, no, you finished them. No. Israel will handle it to defend their borders, and they'll see what is needed to resolve the issue. Now, we got American citizens wrapped up in that, I understand. But we have to be very strategic and careful of how we actually get involved in these things. And it requires a rational mind. But what I'm noticing on Twitter is a lot of people are very emotional about this, either for Palestine or for Israel. I see Ben Shapiro beefing with Andrew Tate. I don't care. All I see is that, there's nothing to do with America, so I don't really care. But it seems like the news want people to talk about this, so I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about how America emboldens a lot of the problems that we see today. But, I digress. Let's go into more current times. So Tucker Carlson did an interview with Vivek Ramaswamy, and I want to play his opening monologue for his video that I found very interesting. And I agree with a lot of what Tucker is saying in this clip. Let's take a look.
A innocent person can watch the video of young people being murdered at a music festival in southern Israel without feeling horrified. It's awful, and there's no excusing it. No matter what you think of Israel's policies in Gaza, you are not allowed to shoot people at music festivals. That's a crime. Israel has a right to respond to that crime and to defend itself. No one seriously contests that. The question for American policymakers, however, is what do we do next? How do we represent the interests of the United States in this chaotic moment? That's not a selfish question. It's the whole point of making policy for a country, to improve and protect that country. If you serve in the U.S. Congress or in the executive branch of government, you have a moral duty to think this way. It's your job. You serve the United States and its population. You have no moral authority except to the extent that you represent your fellow Americans. That's our system. It used to be obvious, but it's worth remembering now, because the conflict between Israel and Hamas could escalate into a war between Iran and its allies and the West. Once a war like that starts, you could easily imagine the use of nuclear weapons and all that entails. Millions dead, the collapse of the global economy. At the very least, you could see an unprecedented energy crisis here. Already gas in one Bay Area service station hit $7.29 a gallon over the weekend. If that trend worsens and persists, the United States, which is already, technically speaking, bankrupt, would plunge into depression. And no, it would not be like the 1930s. Close to 10 million people have come here over the last 3 years from the poorest places in the world. The overwhelming majority of them are on some form of federal subsidies. You wonder how that's going to work out when the U.S. government runs out of money. So there's a lot at stake in how we encourage Israel to respond to the horrifying Hamas attacks. Wisdom and long-term thinking are essential, but you will not be surprised to learn that is not what we are getting.
I agree. The reason why I think we're getting so reactionary and all this media, and they keep putting out the drone attacks and the people, or keep telling us the death count or 14 Americans got, is because they're trying to goad us or guide us like sheep down a particular conclusion and a particular path, right? I always mentioned this point. Me and Malcolm X agree on this point. The media is the most dangerous entity in the world. It can make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent because it can control what? Framing. I have a theory, a working theory here, is that maybe they knew about this attack. There's reports that Egypt warned Israel that something was going on and that a possible attack was going to happen, and Israel ignored the warning. I don't know if Israel was distracted with something else, or they thought, no, we got enough defense to handle whatever Hamas got going on. Maybe that was the case. Maybe it was hubris. I don't know, right? But a lot of the things that have been happening seems out of the ordinary to me, right? Because I always hear how good Israel's intelligence network is. So I don't know how we didn't even see it coming, right? And now you got all these warmongers like Nikki Haley, right, who I think benefits when a war happens. That's why she's so gung-ho about it. Why the media is putting out a certain framing, a certain message, is because they want America to do a certain thing, intervene, right? And I think we're already sending military aid already to Israel already, right? I hear on our side, right, and this is where American interventionism, this is the inconvenient truth about it, is that it put us last. It put us in a more vulnerable position than before we intervened. We barely got any oil reserves. Thank you, Biden. Most of our military equipment, we have a shortage of military equipment because we sent a lot to Ukraine already, and now we're sending more. We're sending some to Israel. In my view, Israel don't need that much military artillery because they have enough resources to handle Gaza already. But this is kind of leading me to think that they might try to do something to Iran, and that's going to cause a bigger conflict, which what Tucker Carlson was warning about. But enough about me speculating. Let's talk to Vivek Ramaswamy and Tucker, and how Vivek kind of points out the same concerns that I have, and he gives his thoughts about what he thinks is going on and what are the possible motives for this action to be taken. Let's take a look.
I think that she is somebody who is, like many politicians, in a position to get wealthier from war. Look at the military contracting business and otherwise. But put that to one side. The message that I would send would be very different. Get to the bottom of what allowed this gaping hole of intelligence and defense to even happen before feeding that same beast. If a doctor told you his job was to keep you from getting cancer and then you got that cancer, don't go trust that same doctor to remove your tumor. They don't let airplanes, when they crash, the pilots or the people who crash the airplane, that airliner is not the one who reviews the black box. And so I think those answers have to come now. That's not a question for later. And I think one of the learnings for the U.S., I think there's a lot of learnings for the U.S., Tucker, but one of the learnings is if that establishment can get it wrong in Israel from a U.S. perspective, that could happen right here at home. And if anything, as an ally, one of the things that we need to wake up to is that we're vulnerable here in the United States to the same. And so we can do some things to prevent that, secure our border, stop funding. I mean, I think one of the things that's been wrong in the U.S. is we have a bad habit while we're bankrupt funding both sides of wars that should have been avoided in the first place. Look at the money that's indirectly found its way to Hamas, the $6 billion paid to Iran in the recent ransom. That was a disaster. Yet we're effectively now funding both sides of a war that we shouldn't have been in the first place in places like Russia and Ukraine even. Think about how we hampered oil production in the United States and then now has funding, U.S. funding going to Ukraine in fighting back against Russia. It's a bad habit in the United States, and we need leaders here who will look after what advances American interests. And I find what Dan Crenshaw said to be cringeworthy. It is shameful. World War I was supposed to be the war that ended all wars, that got us to World War II. That can't be the way that we run foreign policy. The job of American leaders is to advance American interests. And I think we support Israeli leaders asking what advances and defends Israel as we should, morally and diplomatically. But leaders here need to look after American interests first.
Isn't that a crazy thing to say? A crazy thing to actually have to articulate that, hey, you're Congress of America, so you have to look out for America's interests. But no, these congressmen seem to be like, oh no, we want war. Oh, we're interested in Israel. Oh, we want to protect Ukraine's borders. But look at our border. Look at your country's borders. Look at all the people you're coming in that don't have the necessary skills to actually have a livable. They don't have skills that will give them a livable wage in America. That's why a lot of immigrants, when they come in here, especially illegal immigrants, when they come over here, they don't have enough. They don't have their skills are not valued enough to have a livable wage, and this is why they rely on the government entitlement programs. And like the Vivek and Tucker Carlson mentioned, we're in debt. We don't have no money to spend. we're here putting ourselves in debt to go fund and protect Ukrainians' borders. Now we're sending military ammunition to Israel. We're doing all this stuff. And then what about the people where this money's coming from? What about the taxpayers? Because the taxpayers is what's funding all this stuff. And it seems like our middleman, aka Congress and government, are using the resources for their own benefit. But in America, it seems like prevention is the worst thing possible. There's a conflict of interest there. Prevention will be cheaper than actually reacting to the cause. And this is what happens every single time. This is American interventionism for you, right? I just finished researching something about Israel. Apparently, Israel had strict gun control laws. What? A population that majority of them served in the military. One of the most targeted people in the world. And you have strict gun laws on them? Huh? How does that make sense? Let me ask you a question. Let's do a thought experiment. If people had 2A constitutional rights like they have, like we have here in America, would there be more victims or less victims against the Hamas attack? I think there'll be less victims. But guess what? They're left what? Defenseless. Like a lot of this stuff don't make sense to me. But hey, they're a sovereign country. They decide how they want to run their nation. That's not my problem. But I'm saying that, hey, when you make a mistake, I see that now it's an emergency on America's part to go in and save Israel or fund Israel money. Like, this is too reactionary for me. I want an American-centric leadership, not a globalist-centric leadership. And this is what we have currently in our country, in our government today. We're part of a global community instead of worrying about national interest. I always, and I'm going to end it off here and then we go into the final clip. I was always brought up to when you fix your own house and everyone worry about fixing their own house, it naturally makes the community better. And that's just how I see the global community. If America worry about their interests and bettering their people, and Israel worry about protecting and bettering the situation of their people, the world would become better if everyone thought the same way. Because everyone gives the appropriate attention to detail to their own problems and solve it, making it less of a burden on someone else to fix it. This is one of the problems why I don't like entitlement programs. And I think if we all follow this idea that, hey, we're all sovereign individuals, we're all sovereign nations, we have to look out for our best interests. And if we collaborate with another country, it's because there's a mutual benefit for both sides. The world will be a lot better place. Instead of trying to go and do something based on some small group of people, what they think is right or wrong for everyone else. This is why I'm against centralized government. But hey, I digress. Let's look at this final clip for the video where I like this monologue from Vivek. I agree with 100% of Vivek. This is one of the reasons why I like Vivek as a candidate. I know some people don't like him, but hey, he gives me Ron Paul vibes. Let's take a look.
I think a big part of what's wrong in the United States today, Tucker, and I don't mean to toot my own horn, but it's why I'm coming in as an outsider to this nonsense, is you have a system that is bought and paid for, both for the people who run on the Democratic ticket, people who run on the Republican ticket, and people who make those decisions in Washington, D.C., that are effectively managed by, in this case, the Azerbaijan lobby that has a lid on discussing this conflict, which, as you pointed out, most Americans haven't heard of. But you'll hear endlessly about Russia's incursion on Ukraine and having to stand on the right side. That's a separate point where I reject that Ukraine is inherently good anyway. But even if it were, a selective moral outrage in that case, but not another one in just a neighboring area that interfaces with Russia as well. So open that Pandora's box around the world. I mean, look at much of Africa, look elsewhere. You're going to find ability to have selective moral outrage. But you only hear about it in certain selective cases that the media and the existing establishment in both parties deem fit for the American public. And what we need is leaders in this country who are honest in calling out atrocities where they occur. What happened in Israel was wrong. I think we require leaders, some on the far left are too afraid to say it, it was wrong. But at the same time, we need leaders on the right who are willing to say it in other places too, like what's happening in Azerbaijan and Armenia. But at the same time, to have the clarity and American-centric forethought to say what policy decisions we make are separate from the moral judgments that we will pass. So to say we will be with you diplomatically, absolutely. To say you have our moral support, absolutely. That we're not going to get in the way of you defending your national boundaries, absolutely. Even further, to say that in limited circumstances that advance U.S. interests, we will provide munitions. We can't do it across the board. It's a zero-sum game when it comes to munitions between Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan next in the future. But in a limited way that advances U.S. interests, that has to be the sole prism. And that doesn't exist right now, Tucker, in the establishment of either political party. And I think that the things that we're saying now to some may sound uncouth. I don't think they should. This is what the job of a national leader actually ought to be. And that's how I'm planning to lead this country if I'm elected.
I agree. I think a bunch of globalists is leading our leadership class right now. And I disagree with that. I think the government's job is for the common good. Common good of who? Their citizens, not the common good of the world. This is why I'm always against open borders, because I'm like, hey, I'm as an owner of my house, I dictate who has access inside my house or not. That's my right to do that because this is my property. This is my home. America, I believe, you scale it up, they have that same right. Right? We're not the world's police. We're not the charity place of the world. Right? We have to look out for our own selves because it's like the airplane scenario. If I don't take care of myself, I can't save my child. What's the point of saving my child who has less capacity to actually help a large swath of people, and I sacrifice myself because I forgot to put my own mask on? And this was America's doing. America's doing all this giving when it's not in a position to actually adequately give to others. And then when America falls or something happens, because we have open borders, and Iran, who knows, can be like, hey, they don't really protect themselves that much. They're too distracted looking at Taiwan, Ukraine, what's going on in Israel. Let's sneak some people in there and let's cause another 9/11. There's nothing stopping that. And this is my problem. I think as a leadership class, you can't be reactionary. You have to consider every possible option and then make contingency plans against that. Hey, let's shore up our open borders. But no, there's a lot of tribalism right now in our political class. Democrats benefit from open borders because a lot of these immigrants that come into the country, they have a strong sentiment towards the Democratic Party. This is why Democrats fight for them to have a path to citizenship. This is why Democrats fight for them to have voting rights. Is because they know they will win. They will benefit politically if these people come in through America. Should our leadership class be thinking about what's best for their party or what's best for their country? I'll let you decide that in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, what you guys think. You agree with me, disagree with me? Do you like American interventionism? Do you not like American interventionism? What's your thoughts about Vivek? What's your thoughts about Ron Paul? What's your thoughts about what Tucker Carlson has mentioned in this video? I really like a lot of what these three men had to say. I agree with a lot of their sentiments, and I hope you do as well. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this Inconvenient Truth, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.